And again, I'm not going to give you a CPR class, but I'll tell you how to do CPR, and it's a very easy thing to do. So we need to make sure we're using the AED and doing CPR at the same time. With this being in the church, there's a good chance that there's going to be multiple people here if something were to happen. So we also need to remember we need to call 911 pretty soon, right? So the way that your AED works is there's a green power button and you have a shock button here, right? So the first thing you're going to do is turn it on, and the AEDs are automated and they tell you everything they want you to do, right? So let's see what yours says when we turn it on.
Call for help.
Right, so we gotta call 911.
Follow instructions to apply pads.
All right, so your pads come right out of the back here.
Remove clothing
And
from
you see
patient's
there's a little notch
chest.
here. So you would just rip it open, take the pads out.
Locate pads package in back of AED.
So it's a very self-explanatory.
Tear
walks you
open
right through
pads
it.
package. Peel adhesive pads from blue liner. Apply pads to patient's bare chest as shown. Remove clothing from
So
patient's
then it'll
chest.
just keep talking through until you put the pads on. And it'll know when the
Locate
pads are
pads
on.
package
And
in
then
back
it will
of
tell you,
AED. Powering off.
once the pads are on, it'll know that the pads are on, and then it'll tell you to stop CPR, and it'll analyze, it'll tell if it's a shockable rhythm or not. So when people go into cardiac arrest, there's different rhythms, right? Some of them are shockable, and some of them, a shock's not gonna do anything for it, we don't shock it. If it is a shockable rhythm, it'll tell you something about charging, clear the patient, and then everybody has to clear the patient. Once everybody's clear, then you would push the shock button, okay? After you push the shock button, start right back into CPR. That's what this will tell you to do, but even if it's still telling you that the least amount of interruption in the CPR, the better, right? Because as we're doing compressions on the chest, we're building up pressure and circulating that blood around. So the least amount of interruption in that possible is the best. So as soon as we hit shock, go right back into CPR, and then this should be about 2 minutes, and then it'll try to analyze again. Does that make sense? All right. And that's really basically it. So like I have a trainer here that it's a different model, but all still the same thing. So this one, when you open it,
Call for help
same thing.
now.
Call for help.
Remove all clothing from patient's chest.
And so this one, we can, if you want, if anybody
Pull
wants
red
to
handle
practice,
to open bag.
we can use this little dummy here, but when you plug it in,
Look at pictures on pads.
it tells you where to put the pads.
Peel
So,
one pad off blue plastic.
the pads are all
Apply
gonna have
pad
pictures
to
on
bare
them.
skin.
And just like in the
Exactly
picture,
as
just like
shown
on
in the
yours,
picture.
and a one on the right side, on the
Press
right
pad
chest,
firmly.
and one on the left side over here, and that's
Peel
where it
other
sends the
pad
electricity through the
off blue
part.
plastic.
If for some reason you had
Apply
somebody
pad
small,
to bare
like
skin.
you had a kid or something like
Exactly
that,
as
you
shown
can always
in the
go front to
picture.
back if you need
Press
to.
pad firmly.
Okay. But if-
Remove all clothing from patient's chest.
So that's gonna go on there like that. And this whole time you're doing this, somebody's doing CPR, right? So if somebody's doing CPR, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna work around them and try to get these
Pull
pads.
red handle to open bag.
Get that pad there, that pad there.
Look at pictures
And
on
once these
pad.
are on, it should
Peel
know
one
it.
pad
So this
off
one's a
blue
trainer.
plastic.
So I think if
Apply pad to bare skin, exactly as shown in the picture. Press pad firmly. Do not touch patient.
so once it knows there's
Evaluating heart rhythm.
so it's analyzing, it's gonna decide if it's a shockable rhythm or not.
Stand by. Preparing to shock.
So then preparing to shock. So
Everyone clear. Press
everyone
flashing
gets
button.
cleared, it's ready. So if you're the one working the AED, you wanna look around, make sure nobody's touching the patient. I'm clear, you're clear, we're all clear.
Shock
And
delivered.
right back into CPR.
Provide chest compressions and rescue breath.
Okay. Is that easy enough? Yeah. So with that being said, if anybody wants to practice with that, you can. I think it's pretty simple. And like I said, the instructions are all going to be given to you. with the CPR, the way that we teach the public CPR now is we teach hands-only CPR. So CPR, we used to teach compressions and rescue breaths, and the problem is that nobody wants to put their mouth on some dead person's mouth, right? So people wouldn't do CPR because they weren't comfortable with that. So we just go to the hands-only CPR, and it's just compressions. And as you're doing those compressions and you're moving the chest up and down, there is air moving in and out as well. So there's air circulating in there, so there's fresh oxygen coming in anyway, and it's better than nothing, right? For those of you that have never taken a CPR class, when we do CPR, you're just putting your two hands together like that and pushing right on the center of the breastbone there, right between the nipple line, or where the nipple line should be, right? And it's just, you want to go about 2 inches down, and you want to go about 100 times a minute. So very easy thing to do. This is a CPR dummy, so if anybody wants to practice that, so just on here like this, at about that rate. Probably not the best thing to sing out loud, but to keep that rate and that rhythm, Staying Alive is a really good song. Or another one, Bites the Dust, or both. They're both good songs that have that about 100 beats per minute rhythm to keep you in a good rhythm. Does anybody have any questions on any of that?
So is there any point you can stop? You said you have to keep CPR. How do you know when you have to stop?
So you would stop either when we get here and take over, or if it recognizes a rhythm that's a good rhythm, the machine, then it might tell you to discontinue.
You're still doing CPR the whole time.
Right. Yep. The more compressions you do, that's the big thing. So you've got to be doing compressions because you've got to be able to circulate that blood and keep the heart alive.
And also, you say not to do breaths, but isn't that better to do breaths?
So
just getting rid of that because people wouldn't do it.
So we get rid of it for a couple of reasons. So one is that people weren't necessarily doing. People wouldn't do CPR because they didn't want to do that part of it. A couple other things is that when you do breaths, you're also interrupting the compression. So like when we do CPR, we do the breaths while we're compressing because we don't want to interrupt the compressions. So that's another reason. And then the other thing is that if you do the breaths wrong, you do them too hard or things like that, you could put air into the stomach, which can cause two things. It puts pressure on the chest, which doesn't allow the heart to function as well, and it also could cause them then to vomit, and then when they vomit, then they aspirate, and we got to suction all that out and all the things. So there's a handful of reasons for it, and so by the time that you call 911 and it takes us a couple minutes to get here, that hands-only CPR is the best thing.
If you're not doing the breaths, do you have to still tilt the head a certain way, or you just gonna leave them?
No, you could just leave them. Yep,
Okay.
yep, just leave them, and always on the floor, right? So obviously here it's always going to be on the floor, but if you're at home, CPR like in a bed doesn't work. There's too much give and bounce, so you want to be on a hard surface. Any other questions?
If you're doing it to me, I want to be on the altar.
The altar will work. The altar will work.
Not serious.
What you got?
This may seem like a stupid question.
No stupid
but
questions.
how do you know when to use that AED? I mean, if the person passes out.
So the AED will only shock shockable rhythms, and if you're in a shockable rhythm, then you need to be shocked.
And it'll tell us, it'll say.
Right, and it'll tell you to push the button to
Yeah.
shock.
So you've made a mistake and the person's still got a heartbeat.
So if I take this and I put it on you right now as you're talking to me, it's not going to let me shock you.
Okay.
So you can always err on the side of caution, right? So I would say if they're unconscious and not breathing, then that's when you need to do CPR and put the AED on. The problem with checking for a pulse is that even in the professionals, sometimes we spend too long checking for a pulse, right? So again, those interruption and compressions is decreasing your chance of survival. So if it takes us a while to be like, oh, do I feel a pulse? I think I feel a pulse. Then to somebody that's not used to it, you could be spending lots of time feeling for a pulse when you could be doing compressions.
Right.
So that's why
When in doubt,
unconscious, not, if they are breathing, then there's a very good chance that they have a pulse. And if you lose your pulse, you're gonna lose your breathing very quickly. So if they're unconscious and they're not breathing, probably a very good chance that they don't have a pulse, and just start the compressions. And even if they still do, you're not gonna, it's a better safe than sorry. The damage done would be negated by it, if the fact that if they really needed it, you'd be doing it for them. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
I just had a question in general about the device. Is there any maintenance that we need to do on that?
No.
Do you check often for battery or?
No, so I know that these ones, the Medtronic ones, have an indicator on here that tells you that the battery's good, and it also has an indicator that tells you like an error, like a check engine light kind of thing. This one, I'm not positive on this one. Probably in the manual you would see something, but I do see a green light blinking here. So I would assume that as long as that green light is blinking, that you're probably good. But probably somewhere in the manual there's something that tells you, like, you know, if you wanted to do like a monthly check, wanted to make sure that it was still good. So we check ours. We actually don't use a whole lot of the AEDs anymore, but the AEDs that we do have, you know, we just look at them every day when we check all the other stuff on the apparatus. So, do you guys have a user manual? Did this come with a user manual?
There should be one
In the back?
back here.
But yeah, if you read in there, it'll give you some specifics, I would assume. But I would assume that this green light that keeps blinking means that we're good. And if that were to go to a red or something like that, then maybe there would be an issue.
Are there replacement pads after you rip open the pad the first time?
You would probably have to purchase them. So I don't know if it came with an extra set or if it just came with the one set. But yeah, we have a EMS supply closet full of a bunch of pads that we can go to replace. So you would have to call this company, this Reviver, and just order them. You would tell them what model you have, and they would send you pads for it.